the Dream 100 Show. The epicenter of influence, collaboration, and exponential growth. You're about to discover the power of relationships. Dream 100 relationships. And you're one relationship away from a totally different business and life. This is your host, Michael Tesner.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 005 of the Dream 100 Show. So over the last couple of episodes, we've been building on the strategy and the framework of the Dream 100. In last week's episode, I talked largely about honing in on who are you actually trying to get their data of. So we talked through a couple of different niches and said, okay, great. If you're trying to go after veterinarians, for example, what are some of the different job titles and things like that? So in episode 4, it was about starting to get that high-level list so that you have your initial Dream 100 contacts. In today's episode, we're going to talk about, okay, great. After you have the contact details, what do you start to do next? So, step 1 is you want to make sure you have all those contact details. Name, email, business website, address. And then ideally, I talked a lot about trying to start to secure business information versus home information. And that one, it's a little bit of a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope if you're going to extreme lengths to find somebody's home address, but if it's readily available online or sometimes it's easily listed out, it's not a terrible thing. Now, again, it's going to vary based on the niche that you're going after, and I'm taking the understanding that you know a little bit more about how they operate. Like certain people would be extremely offended if they ever got something sent to their home and they never gave you their home address. Whereas other people, like if you're sending something to a marketing person like myself, I would actually take it in the opposite direction and say, well, they did some research, they tracked me down, and they wanted to send me something. Now, that one, again, it has to be taken on a kind of case-by-case basis, and that largely is going to depend on the type of people, the type of businesses that you are going after. So you've got that list. Now, I would highly encourage you to have 120, 150 names on there. The Dream 100 framework makes the assumption that you're going to have 100 relationships that you can start to nurture, 100 different types of people that you can start to do this outreach to. But what you're going to find very rapidly as you start to hit some of these people, maybe you're going to have some undeliverable emails, maybe some businesses that were recently sold or closed, and that didn't necessarily come up in your research. So you're going to whittle that list down. If you only had 100 to start with, you might all of a sudden be down to 90 or 80. The math is really largely focused on that 100 number. So for me, I like to have 115, 120, and there's no necessarily magical number that you're going to have 10 businesses that don't make it to your list, for example. It varies. I've seen some cases where you build 120 and all 120, you're starting to work those relationships. And I've seen the opposite, where you've had a list of 120, 130, and you got a lot of no's right out of the gate, or you got a lot of undeliverables, and all of a sudden you're kind of back to the drawing board. I want to make sure that you have a really good core list of right around 100 to 120. That's kind of that list that you're going to start working. Now, when you have the main contact details, that's where things start. But here is really where the magic of the Dream 100 starts to take effect. So as you have these details, the next step in the research process is to start to go through these contacts and start to list out all of their different social media channels. I'm looking for their Facebook accounts, their LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram. I'm looking for all of those different aspects. I want to know all of those. So you're going to go through all these different contacts that you have. And you're going to start to list out the links to their personal and business accounts. The reason that I want personal and business is that as we talk through these next steps in this video, in this podcast today, you're going to be doing outreach to both. So I want you to gather all of that onto your Google Doc, for example, your Google Sheet, Excel, whatever format you're going to use. This is also, again, why we built the Dream 100 software tool, because it manages all of this for you very, very easily. It's designed to only focus and manage those relationships. So as you have all of that, the next step in the process is to start to mine and review that data. So, example, let's say you are going after an audience of chiropractors because you are in the fitness space and you feel that chiropractors could refer a ton of people your way. So you build up a list of all the different chiropractors in the area. And you focus on people that have multiple locations. So you have like the mega Dream 100 names, and then you have all the other chiropractors. But you know, if you start to land some of these chiropractors, they could have the capacity to refer hundreds and hundreds of people to you. So you're going to get their name, their email, their address, but then again, all the practice details, the practice website, their practice Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, now known as X, all of that stuff. But where I'm most interested is all of the personal social media accounts. The reason I want the personal accounts is that you're then going to start to review them one by one, and you're going to start to add all of the different personal things that you're going to learn about that particular Dream 100 contact. So let's say it's John Smith, the chiropractor, and you start with Facebook. And it doesn't matter necessarily which one of the accounts you start with. But let's say that you start with Facebook. You're not going to friend request them just yet. That is going to be part of the process. But what you're looking for right now is to carve out and finish out all of the research for your contacts. So you're going to go to his Facebook account or her Facebook account, their LinkedIn, X, Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok, all the ones you can find. And you're going to start to list out all of the different personal details you can find. Where did they go to high school? Where did they go to college? So like what medical school in this particular case? All readily available online if it's not even listed on their account. That stuff is all public record. You would be shocked how much stuff is in the public record, especially in the medical space, for example. It's very, very easy to find where they went to college. Then you continue to dig deeper. Do they have kids? How many kids do they have? What are the ages of those kids? What city does the chiropractor live in? And depending on how open or closed they have their account set, and everyone has different privacy policies set up, so sometimes you can see very little on Facebook. That's public. Other times you can see everything. So you're able to start to write those things down. And what you're looking for are things that could be an interesting kind of, not even necessarily an introduction, but interesting things that you can start to use as we go through this process. And we're going to, again, continue to talk through this process. We're now starting to get into the meat of the action. So all of those personal things. I love, where do they go to college? Where do they go to high school? I really want to know what city they live in, because you then can start to research certain restaurants that they visited. So if they've reviewed something on Yelp, if they've checked in on Facebook, you can see some of the restaurants they're going to. Now you might be saying, well, Michael, this is like borderline stalkerish. A, it's all readily available online, but B, you're not going to start off the process when you start your outreach by saying, hey, Mr. Chiropractor, I know that you went to this high school and this college. I did all my research on you and love to connect. That's not how you're going to start the relationship. But this is getting the research stuff done so that you have your data. Because otherwise, as you start to work the process, you're going to have a couple of, let's say you only grab 20 people from your Dream 100, and then you start to work those, and then you're moving back to this step, and it's all over the place. I mentioned to you on podcast number 1 that when deployed correctly, this strategy works 100% of the time, but you have to deploy it correctly. And once you start the outreach and you start this process, you don't pause. You don't all of a sudden send a couple of emails and a couple of other points of interest and points of connection and then stop. Because, I forgot to do the research and figure out what this particular person is interested in. So this part of the process, you're grabbing as much personal information. Now think of all of the fun stuff, hobbies, family, things that you can look at having some kind of connection with, something that could potentially make its way into gift form in the future as we start to look at deploying gifts. But learn as much as you can personally about that contact. If all of their social media stuff is kind of private, which that very well happens with really, really high-level executives, if you're targeting people from the Fortune 500, for example, Googling their name and then adding something like and hobbies and family and college, you're going to start to find interviews where they're going to talk about that stuff. As they're doing an interview, they're going to say how many kids they have, where they grew up, where they went to college, hobbies. Like it's very, very easy to find this. Just because it may not jump out at you in 30 seconds on Facebook doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to find this stuff out. So you're going to go through your list. And again, as I just mentioned, ideally it's got about 120 names. And you're going to start to list out all the different things. Now, if you want to keep things really organized, you definitely can. Again, shout out to the Dream 100 software, which makes this a lot easier. But you want to have different columns, so you're not just lumping one big paragraph on an Excel document, for example, that has 100 different things. I want to know food, and ideally the cuisine they might like, where they've recently went to, and that can be seen on Yelp. That can be seen on Facebook check-ins. Colleges is definitely a great one. Kids and family, are they married? You can then start to go to their spouses' social media pages and start to learn a lot of details from there. When you go to the company pages, in particular local type businesses, they're largely going to be connected to their business page, so they're probably going to talk about things like birthdays, or happy birthday to our chiropractor, they just celebrated their birthday. They're going to be out of town because they're doing XYZ. There's so much free stuff you can find, it's insane. Now, like everything, depending on your finances, depending on your time, to me, this is something that should be outsourced. I mean, that's why we execute the Dream 100 strategy for people, because this isn't a 5-minute thing. Like we're doing heavy research, borderline like research that a private investigator might be using if they're looking to kind of skip trace someone, where they're literally going and looking through all the different photos. Like we're going to great lengths so that we know like anything and everything that is available online, we're going to find out. Like it's crazy scary how much stuff is out there, to the point where like we can look at images, look at the metadata on an image to know they live in this particular city, for example. So that's the next step in the process. So you've got your contact list that you built in the last episode. And in this episode, you started to then take all those and start to grab all of the personal details, all that stuff. Now, once you have that completed, you can, for now, check off the research part of this task. You've got your list, you've got all their hobbies and all that great information. That's all a lot of the hard part stuff is now done. I could argue it's a little bit of the boring part, but I really enjoy the chase. I enjoy the hunt. I love finding things online about people personally that are then going to really help us in the process. And that's really how the Dream 100 starts to differentiate itself. So the next step in this process, before you start to friend request, before you start to do any outreach, before we start to send direct mail, before we start to send gifts, there's two completely different things that I need you to do. The first one is in the first column on your Excel document, your Google Sheet, in our software, whatever tool that you're using to keep this organized, I want you to list your dream outcome for that particular contact. And maybe it's the same for every one of them. Maybe it's not. Maybe your dream outcome for some of them is to turn into a referral partner. Maybe your dream outcome for some of the other ones is for them to become clients. Maybe your dream outcome, if you were going after that PR list, is your dream outcome would be for XYZ contact to be on their TV show. What are the dream outcomes for every one of those contacts individually? You're going to get that listed down. I never, 10 years ago, I was never a huge believer in all things law of attraction. I've seen the movie The Secret 20 times. I've read all the different books relating to energy and things like that. But there's a lot of power that starts to happen when it's actually written down. What is that dream outcome for that individual contact? Again, it may be the same for all of them. But what I like to do to personalize it, let's say that contact is John Smith. John Smith turns into a referral partner and refers us 100 patients a year every year. And if that's the same for all those chiropractors on that list, you just change the first name. Great, 100. Maybe this one, they've got 10 locations. The dream outcome is 1,000 patient referrals, for example, to you. So list out that dream outcome. That's the first piece. The other piece that has nothing to do with what you just did is you need to make sure that your social media is on point. You need to make sure that your LinkedIn page has a great picture, has all the different links, that has really good copy. It's not completely outdated. It's got all the things that you would want that particular contact to know. Your Facebook page, the exact same thing. If you have raunchy photos or things that you do not want someone seeing, unless you're in that particular industry, you need to clean that stuff up. You're doing what I like to call kind of a marketing 360 audit of your social media, your website, so your company website, your personal website, every one of your social channels. As you're starting to do outreach, how is it going to look if you're hitting somebody up on X, sending direct messages, starting to comment on their stuff, and you haven't posted on X in 9 years? So before you start to deploy all the next stuff I'm going to train you on, you need all of your social media game to be on point, updated with updated pictures, calls to action, and you need to start to, if allowed, depending on the platform you're on, to start to backdate content if you haven't been active for quite a while. But at the very least, I want you to have, a week or 2 or 3 of content so that when you start to deploy the next strategies, they're not going to go and see crickets, because you're going to start to lose people if they go to your social stuff and they see crazy stuff. They don't even see your business. They see a picture that clearly is not what you look like currently. They go to your LinkedIn page. It doesn't match your Facebook page. You've got to have all of that stuff dialed in before you move to the next step. So, quick review. Your homework for this episode is to take your contacts and then add all the different tabs and sections for personal information. You're going to go and you're going to stalk them online and find out all the different things that you can about them personally. Professionally, for some things is fine. Maybe recent awards that they've won, certain associations that they're in. That stuff is fine also. But I'm more interested in, where do they go to college? What are some of their hobbies? How many kids do they have? Where do they like to travel to? What restaurants? What movies did they watch? What sports teams do they like? All the personal stuff that you're going to be able to leverage and start to really build those connections. From there, you're going to end the document by adding out your dream 100 outcome for every single one of those prospects. And then finally, you're going to audit your social stuff. Clean it up. New pictures, new bios, new links. Make sure it is 100% on point and looking good. Then you're ready to start the outreach. Tune in next week. We're going to start to talk about how you start to do the outreach, what the messaging looks like, how often. Do you just do it digitally? Do you do it offline? And then really, how do we start to gain some traction? As always, thank you for tuning in. Like, comment, share, give me some love. Make sure you tune in next week. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.